Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments.
Which in this case was JD Vance.
Yeah.
I know him a little bit.
What do you think of him?
Look, we're from the same generation. We're both from the Midwest, different parts of the Midwest.
Right.
I know a lot of guys like JD Vance. I run into a lot of guys like him.
And explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote,
when I was growing up in Indiana.
Thiel. Peter Thiel is his big backer.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, if people don't know who that is, he started PayPal.
Yeah.
He's gay. He's a billionaire. I mean, I've had a couple of people who knew you were coming on this week said,
What happens when a Yale-educated author who once despised Trump suddenly becomes his VP pick? Political whiplash so severe it caught Jimmy Kimmel's attention. And you know when late-night TV starts roasting you, things have gotten bad. Stick around as we dissect the most cringeworthy moments from Kimmel's segment that had social media exploding with memes. We'll show you exactly how Vance went from writing that Trump was cultural heroin to practically writing Trump love letters overnight. Hey, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. We know you want to. Go ahead, we'll wait. Alright, appreciate it. Now back to the video. When JD Vance first burst onto the national scene, he was the thoughtful hillbilly elegy author who seemed to understand working class struggles better than most Yale graduates. But as Jimmy Kimmel hilariously exposed, Vance has undergone a transformation so dramatic.
Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president...
Ask Pete what he thinks about Peter Thiel being so in love with JD Vance, who is flatly against gay marriage.
So I think it's a profound contradiction, but maybe it's not that complicated. I know there are a lot of folks who say, what's going on with some of these?
Why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear, and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that
Silicon Valley folks veering into Trump world with JD Vance and backing Trump. What are they thinking? Silicon Valley's supposed to be, they're supposed to care about climate. They're supposed to be, pro-science and rational and libertarians. So normally libertarians don't like authoritarians.
It's giving viewers neck problems from the whiplash. Remember when Vance called Trump cultural heroin? Yeah, that actually happened. And Kimmel wasn't about to let anyone forget it. Kimmel's takedown was brutal precisely because it wasn't just accusations or hearsay. It was Vance's own words coming back to haunt him in glorious high definition. The late-night host didn't just tell the audience about Vance's flip-flops. He showed them, creating what might be the most uncomfortable before and after comparison since those sketchy weight loss ads. This is what I call political whiplash, Kimmel quipped as he displayed a split screen that could give anyone motion sickness. Vance in 2016 versus Vance now. On one side, there's pre-political Vance warning that Trump is leading the white working class to a very dark place. On the other, there's vice presidential candidate Vance, suddenly discovering that Trump is actually the second coming of political Jesus. Talk about a road to Damascus moment, except instead of finding religion, Vance found ambition. The audience's reaction was almost as entertaining as the segment itself. The camera repeatedly cut to shocked faces and uncomfortable laughter as the contrast became more extreme. One particularly devastating moment came when Kimmel played a clip of Vance describing Trump as dangerous, toxic, and a disaster waiting to happen. The audience gasped so loudly you'd think Kimmel had just revealed that puppies aren't real. What made this segment go super viral wasn't just the comedy, it was the receipts. In an era where politicians claim, "I never said that," faster than a toddler denies eating cookies with chocolate all over their face, Kimmel's team brought visual evidence. They dug up obscure interviews, found forgotten quotes, and presented them alongside Vance's current Trump worship in a way that made his transformation impossible to deny. It wasn't commentary, it was documentary evidence with a laugh track. Kimmel's research team deserves a raise for the archaeological expedition they conducted into Vance's past. They unearthed interviews where Vance went beyond standard criticism into genuinely worried territory, comparing Trump supporters to drug addicts, which is particularly interesting given his book's focus on addiction in his community. It's like watching someone burn their own bestseller page by page, Kimmel joked as the evidence mounted. The most devastating moment came when Kimmel's team found Vance's description of Trump as unfit for office. Cut to to present day Vance arguing that Trump is the most qualified person to lead America. The juxtaposition was so stark you could almost hear Vance's principles snapping in two like a dry twig. But Kimmel wasn't content with just showing the contrast. He wanted to understand it. How does someone go from thinking Trump is basically America's Hitler to thinking he's America's savior? Did Vance suffer a head injury we don't know about? Did aliens replace him with a pod person? Kimmel asked as the audience roared. The segment's power came from its simplicity. It let Vance's words do the talking. When someone says Trump is dangerous and then later says he's a political genius, no additional commentary is really needed. The hypocrisy speaks for itself, though Kimmel was happy to provide some colorful narration anyway. By the end of the segment, the audience wasn't just laughing, they were genuinely stunned. Kimmel had presented such overwhelming evidence of Vance's transformation that it raised serious questions about political integrity. As the laughter died down, Kimmel delivered the knockout punch, calling Vance the most shameless political shapeshifter in American history, who sold his soul for a seat at the table. The line hit hard because it wasn't just a joke, it was a devastatingly accurate assessment of what the audience had just witnessed. Vance didn't just mildly shift his position, he performed an Olympic-level gymnastics routine from fierce Trump critic to devoted acolyte. That Olympic-level gymnastics routine came with timestamps and receipts. Kimmel's team assembled a devastating month-by-month chronicle of Vance's transformation that's so precise you could set your watch to it. The segment didn't just point out that Vance changed his mind, it meticulously documented when each principle got tossed overboard, creating what social media users quickly turned into memes about severe cases of political whiplash. The timeline Kimmel presented wasn't just a vague suggestion of flip-flopping, it was a detailed calendar graphic showing the exact correlation between Vance's improving opinion of Trump and his rising political ambitions. This isn't just selling out, Kimmel quipped to audience laughter, it's selling out with a timestamp. The visual presentation made it impossible to miss how conveniently Vance's newfound love for Trump aligned with his need for votes. What made the segment particularly damning was Kimmel pinpointing the exact moment Vance realized he needed Trump's base to win his Senate campaign. This wasn't a gradual evolution of thought or a genuine change of heart. It was political calculation in its purest form. The audience gasped when Kimmel showed the polling data indicating Vance's Senate hopes were dead without Trump supporters, immediately followed by clips of Vance's first pro-Trump statements. In one devastating sequence, Kimmel played a clip from 2016 where Vance confidently stated Trump's promises are empty. This was immediately juxtaposed with footage from 2022 where Vance praised Trump kept his promises to America. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or gasp at the brazen inconsistency. Even hardcore political observers were stunned by the stark contrast, especially when presented side by side without commentary, allowing Vance's own words to do all the damage. Beyond general support, Kimmel's team dug into specific policy positions. The segment displayed tweets from Vance criticizing Trump's border policies side by side with current campaign speeches, where he now champions those identical approaches. Immigration, trade policy, foreign relations. On issue after issue, the segment showed Vance's remarkable ability to take whatever position seemed politically expedient at the moment. Kimmel didn't just deliver facts, he seasoned the takedown with brutal jokes that had the audience howling. When discussing Vance's ability to completely reverse his positions, Kimmel wondered if Vance had undergone spine removal surgery. The audience roared when he added, "This man has the moral compass of a weather vane." The jokes landed so well because they weren't just funny. They perfectly captured the essence of what viewers were witnessing. The linguistic evolution tracked in the segment was particularly revealing. In an 18-month period, Vance went from labeling Trump supporters as racists to praising them as patriots. This wasn't just changing positions on policy, it was a complete reinvention of his vocabulary to match whatever audience he was trying to court. This linguistic transformation further reinforced the narrative of Vance as someone willing to say anything to advance his political career. Among the most compelling parts of Kimmel's breakdown was his presentation of Vance describing Trump as cultural heroin and America's Hitler. These weren't casual criticisms or mild disagreements, they were fundamental moral judgments about Trump's character and impact on America. The audience was left wondering how someone could possibly reconcile these assessments with his current enthusiastic support unless one of those positions wasn't sincere. So why is Vance being crowned the king of political flip-floppers? The receipts don't lie. Kimmel's segment identified identified at least 15 major policy positions where Vance completely reversed himself, each reversal mysteriously coinciding with his ascent in Republican politics. This wasn't just changing a position or two, it was a systematic abandonment of virtually every principle he had previously claimed to hold dear. What makes this timeline so devastating is that it isn't based on speculation or opinion. It's Vance's own words on video saying completely contradictory things depending on his political needs at the moment. The timestamps don't just suggest opportunism, they prove it with mathematical precision. As each policy position flipped, Vance climbed another rung on the political ladder. While Vance was busy climbing that political ladder, his wallet was apparently getting lighter by the day. Kimmel's most brutal segment wasn't just about what Vance said, it was about why he said it, connecting those conveniently timed flip-flops to some seriously embarrassing financial and polling realities that had Vance scrambling like a rat on a sinking ship. The savagery reached new heights when Kimmel displayed a series of financial graphs showing Vance's book sales and speaking engagements, taking a nosedive right as his Trump love affair began heating up. The audience howled as Kimmel dubbed this phenomenon principles with an expiration date. Apparently, Vance's anti-Trump convictions came with a best before label that coincided perfectly with his bank account running low. But the financial desperation was just the appetizer for Kimmel's roast. The main course arrived when he played a montage of Vance's early supporters and donors heading for the exits after his anti-Trump remarks. The sequence showed wealthy conservatives and potential campaign contributors literally walking away from Vance, followed immediately by clips of his sudden, miraculous conversion to Trumpism. The audience didn't need a weatherman to know which way this wind was blowing. Notice anything strange about the timing here? Kimmel asked the audience as he pointed to a chart showing donor abandonment on one side and Vance's first pro-Trump interview on the other. It's like watching someone suddenly declare their undying love for broccoli right after their doctor threatens to put them on cholesterol medication. Weiss. Things got even spicier when Kimmel connected the dots between Vance and Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel. The segment featured graphics showing Thiel's significant financial backing of Vance's political ambitions, with Kimmel suggesting this deep-pocketed relationship might explain some of Vance's convenient memory lapses about his former Trump criticisms. Nothing says men of the people like having a tech billionaire as your political sugar daddy, Kimmel quipped as the audience erupted. The most devastating sequence came when Kimmel displayed polling data from Vance's Senate race, showing him getting absolutely crushed without Trump's base. These numbers weren't just bad, they were political life support territory. Right after showing these dismal polls, Kimmel cut to footage of Vance's first pro-Trump interview, creating an unmistakable cause and effect narrative that had the audience groaning at the naked opportunism. "I'm not saying his conversion was insincere," Kimmel said with mock seriousness. "I'm just saying it happened at exactly the moment the polls showed he was political roadkill without Trump supporters. Pure coincidence? I'm sure." The comedic dagger went deeper when Kimmel brought out a fake psychologist to evaluate Vance's behavior. This expert, complete with glasses and clipboard, solemnly diagnosed Vance with selective amnesia and opportunistic personality disorder, describing symptoms that included an inability to remember one's own strongly held opinions when money and power are at stake. The audience was practically rolling in the aisles as the mock doctor recommended a complete removal of the spine as the only effective treatment. But the knockout punch came when Kimmel delivered what might be the most scathing line of the entire segment. The audience fell suddenly silent as Kimmel said, "Vance wrote about the struggles of the working class, then decided the best way to help them was to join the billionaire who puts his name on gold toilets." This stark contradiction between Vance's working class credentials and his newfound devotion to Trump's gilded extravagance hit home in a way that pure jokes couldn't match. The silent moment was followed by a wave of uncomfortable laughter as the hypocrisy sank in. What made Kimmel's timeline so compelling wasn't just the laughs, it was the precision with which he mapped Vance's transformation. Through detailed polling data and campaign finance reports, Kimmel showed that Vance's conversion happened at the exact moment when surveys indicated he couldn't win his primary without Trump's endorsement. The segment revealed how Vance, after seeing these numbers, worked through intermediaries to secure Trump's blessing, completely contradicting his previous statements that he would never compromise his values for political gain. The timeline doesn't lie, Kimmel said as he wrapped up the segment. Unless you think it's just an amazing coincidence that Vance discovered Trump's greatness at precisely the moment his political career depended on it. The sting in Kimmel's closing remarks wasn't just about getting laughs, it was a surgical strike on Vance's character. Kimmel laid it out plain as day. Vance's political gymnastics show a man who values power over principles. As Kimmel put it, either JD Vance was lying then or he's lying now. And either way, that should matter to voters who expect their leaders to actually believe what they say. What makes this takedown so powerful isn't just the jokes, but the uncomfortable truth it reveals about modern politics, where convictions have become as disposable as last week's talking points, and integrity gets traded away faster than stocks in a market crash.